Good afternoon, everyone. You are in the zone with Rich Sutter and Pete Coles. We're doing a rare Wednesday taping because tomorrow is all about the turkey, all about Thanksgiving, Pete. What are you giving thanks for this year, Pete?
There we go. That's better. Okay, now I turn myself up. I'm giving thanks because I made another turn around the sun.
That's awesome. Got to be thankful for what you have.
Right.
For what you have, it's really important. And so we just want to wish all our fans happy Thanksgiving. I'm sure there's something in everybody's life to be thankful for. And at this time when we take the holidays, take some time to slow down, to reflect a little bit, to reflect on all the things that we're happy for, and to maybe look towards the new year as it approaches as some things maybe we want to improve in our life as well. Because life is constantly in flux, constantly in change, and if you move with it, it moves a little better. So we're going to bounce right into Feed 'em Fish, Pete. It has been a very, very exciting week on all levels of the hoop drama. Right now, we're in Hoop Troop. We are completely ensconced watching tons and tons of games, trying to stay abreast of everything that's happening right now. And to be honest with you, the pace is just a little crazy and dizzying right now, but we love it. We love it. What's happening right now with the NBA in full swing, they're doing some of their in-season tournament games, which have turned out to be very exciting and fun. And men's college basketball is in that phase where they're doing a lot of non-conference stuff right now because the conference schedules haven't kicked in. And this is what Pete and I alluded to earlier in a previous show, was that most of the time these big schools are sitting at home devouring cannolis at a $90,000, $100,000, $125,000 clip per game. So if you have $100,000 per game and you play 10 non-conference games, you just offered up $1 million to the street. $1 million in guarantee games is what you'd be paying out right now on average. So we think that's a big number, but it also tilts the paradigm a little bit. It allows big conferences to get out and go 10-0, stay at home. And then we talked about those brief, really grueling respites that they take in Maui and in the Bahamas and those really rigorous places they go to schedule those games. I know that there was a huge, huge fire in Maui, and a lot of this stuff is going on around that.
What was up with the brouhaha?
In Lahaina, there's a lot of the tournaments that are doing some of that. I just didn't see the tournament for East Palestine, Ohio. I must have missed that one. But we're going to jump right into Feed 'em Fish, Pete, and we're going to just kind of go through a litany of different things that are happening right now in the basketball world. Really, really exciting stuff right now. To say who's number one right now is going to be really, really difficult. Anybody who watched the Kansas Marquette game last night will understand what's going on at the top levels of college basketball right now. There is immense parity right now. There is a situation where any team on that top level is capable of knocking off anyone. And anybody who watched the Marquette and Kansas game last night, I'll be honest, I was a little surprised at how well and easily that Marquette handled the Kansas Jayhawks. I was a little surprised at that. The $2 million man, Hunter Dickinson, ran into a young player by the name of Oso Ogodaro, and that young man blocked every single shot in the building last night. He had Kansas intimidated. He had them looking over their shoulder for him, and he did an absolute job of controlling the paint and absolutely dominated Dickinson in my mind. Oso Ogodaro, not a household name, and I doubt he got $2 million, but he's going to have a bright NBA future, I think. He's in Texas, in the Marquette region right now. Young man, I believe he's from Texas, but Marquette got themselves a great player. There. We'll start off in the Feed 'em Fish. I want to start off locally because UConn has really, really surprised me. I've watched them, and they have really, really surprised me. They were very, very excited about their new recruit, Stephen Castle, and should be. He's a very, very talented player, but he hasn't played a significant amount of minutes right now because he's been injured. And so, with all of the attrition and some of the injury that they have, you have people on Twitter saying right now that UConn might be the number one team in the country.
Wow.
Caravan is playing at an extremely high level. Donovan Clingan has been in and out a little bit with some injuries and stuff, but you're looking at Danny Hurley taking primarily a new team. You know, they lost Andre Jackson. They lost Adamo Sanoga. They lost a bunch of different wings that were out on that team as well. And to watch them kind of retool and have their situation be right back in the thick of things with everybody having NIL capabilities right now. They can't say, well, they're doing really good with the NIL because most of this isn't transfers. Most of this is program building. Most of this is program integrity. And so the Husky fans have a lot to be happy about. I think right now, when I watch them, obviously, the Big East is loaded. Marquette is unbelievably good after watching them manhandle Kansas last night. Creighton has Trey Alexander and maybe the best offensive coach in the country in McDermott. So the Big East is going to be really, really difficult this year. And those three teams have been talked about to be in the top 25. And I really, really see that happening for a good part of the year. The only thing that could happen, and it happened to UConn last year before they went on their title run, the only thing that could really happen right now is that they carnivore each other and they knock each other down by beating on each other a little bit. But right now, UConn is on pace to set a NCAA record as well because they've won 22 straight non-conference games, and they are on record to break that with the next opponent that's up 23 would break it. So exciting for the UConn fans. They've won 22 straight. Castle is injured, going to be out for a little bit of time. Stephen Castle, their primary recruit, but they're doing well without him. And when he gets back, I only see that improving and bettering their lineup. So,
looping back to the Big East, though, if they're beating up on each other, doesn't that make them stronger come tournament time? Like they're seeing a better level of competition?
It could.
Yeah.
Right? And it did last year with UConn, because if you remember last year, they finished fourth before they went on that tournament run. They finished third or fourth in their conference. That could easily happen to them again this year, and then they would go on and make another great tournament run. It does, as coaches often say, metal gets sharpened, in the fire, and so it certainly can help. But I've seen it also break some teams also that thought they were better than they were, thought they were going to have a great season, got into it, looked at their record and said, wow, we finished fifth in our league, and it's somewhat defeating. So I think that could go either way, but I'm of the mindset that you are, that it does improve your product, it does make you better, and it does prepare you for the games ahead. You can't hide anywhere in college basketball right now. Everybody's good. You look at James Madison knocking off Michigan State. You look at some of the other upsets that have been happening along the way. Bryant knocked off Florida Atlantic. We're going to talk about that in a second. They lifted the interim tag from Phil Martelli Jr., gave him the job full-time, which I thought was a pretty good move on Bryant's part, given everything that had aspired previous to that. I think it was a good idea to settle things down. They celebrated his new contract by going out and beating number 10 in the country, Florida Atlantic. So that might get them a little extra angry when they come down here to play my Bonnies, but that's another huge upset that's gone on. Duke lost to Arizona. That's not that big of an upset, but some of these other upsets are really, really significant. Kansas losing to Marquette. Bill Self will utilize that as a tool to get his team ready, to make them better. But they were exposed last night a little bit. They got exposed, and one of the reasons I think they got exposed is because Marquette just kept coming after them. And as much as that's Kansas's MO, where they'll play through a lot of adversity and keep coming, we saw that in the Kentucky game. Last night, Marquette just kept coming after them and putting it to them, and really, really did a good job. Keep an eye on that big man, Oso. Really, really impressed me last night. Okay, number two, some positive news. Bronny James took part of the USC warm-ups the other night. He was in uniform, took part in warm-ups, did not play in the game. They do not have a schedule for him to return. Obviously, this is very serious, something that you want to use extreme caution with. but I'm hopeful that we'll see him this year because I think that adds a new dimension to USC that can really change the dynamic there. Purdue, we've talked about our big guy, Zach Edey. He has not disappointed us in his start, Pete. He's averaging a double-double. He looks a little thinner this year, a little more svelte, and he's moving better. I think he might have lost a little bit too much weight because I liked him a little bigger, a little bit more full because he gets knocked around down there a little bit as a center. But he's playing at a very, very high level. They had a very good win over Gonzaga the other night, and their team looks pretty good. They look to me like we talked about they could look. When they lost to FDU, does that create a Virginia scenario when Virginia lost to UMBC? Virginia came back the very next year with almost the same identical team and won the national title. Now you have a situation where Purdue, very close to their unit that they had that was upset in the tournament by FDU, certainly with Zach Edey, the big man, leading the way, that team might resonate this year. That might use that motivation to get them going. Coach Painter, I think, is a great coach. I love some of the stuff they do on offense. I've watched them, some of the stuff that they run to get the ball inside, to get the ball to the right spots. I really, really like him. He just has a little bit of a big game hang on him as they get into those big games, and they've lost a lot of those big games over the course of the years. They really, really need to have this year where at least, not a Final Four run, but a pretty deep run into the tournament, I think, to kind of cleanse themselves of that FDU. I think what you're seeing is a focused team. What you're seeing is somebody who got punched in the nose and has to keep fighting, and now they're going to keep going at it, and it's been good for them because I think that they're refocused, recalibrated, and when you put that on a team after they've been through that, it kind of makes them better, and I think that's what you're seeing right now from Purdue. I think they're better than they were last year, but the focus is really, really what matters. They call it locked in right now. The young kids call it locked in. We're locked in. We're 100% locked in. Well, it looks like to me Purdue's locked in, and they could be having a very, very good year. Louisville fans, I know it's been hard, and I know that you might feel like that old LifeLock lady that does the commercial who's fallen. She can't get up, and you don't know what to do as a program. You hired yourself a coach, Kenny Payne. A lot of people shook their head and kind of questioned which direction the program was going. And no question, that program, for what it was back in the day when I was a young man, up until very, very recently, was one of the top 25 programs in the country. They are no longer in that category. They finished desperately in very close to last place in the ACC. They're picked to finish close there again this year. But I did watch them play against Texas in Madison Square Garden the other night. And although I wasn't a big fan of the hire of Kenny Payne, I think at this time, given where their program is, he might be the right guy. Because I watched him closely the other night on television. I watched the interactions that he had with his players. I also watched the way that they interacted with him. And they're a long way from home. But that was the absolute best basketball game of the year that I saw the other day when Texas beat Louisville. Now, Texas is really, really good. They brought in NIL point guard from Oral Roberts, Max Abmas. And the other night against Louisville, Louisville had the game most of the way. Texas made a really good run at the end. And then Abmas got caught on a dribble, one-on-one, clock going down, 3, 2, 1. And I mean, when I tell you this young man from Louisville defended this as well as you could defend a shot, he defended it as well as you could possibly defend it, and Abmas got it off and made the shot at the buzzer to put Texas over the top. But it showed me that Louisville, although I wouldn't say they're 100% back, they're much improved from what they have been. And the way that team is responding to Coach Payne, the way that they're responding to the assistant coaches on that stuff is really pretty cool. Really pretty cool. I'm going to ask Pete in a bit to try and find some stuff for me that Pete's great at doing during the show. I want to see a couple of different scenarios, and I'll ask you about them in a second, Pete, when we get going. But a couple of them are just things that are happening in the game. Number one is the fight in the Providence-Kansas State game. Number two is Frank Martin, the UMass coach, staring his player down on the sidelines the other night. And number three is Shaw Holloway, Seton Hall, going with the coach at Wagner to shake hands. And if you can find those three for me, Pete, obviously you're the MVP. But I'm going to keep rolling here. I'm going to run through Feed 'em Fish. And then if we can find some of those things, I'm going to talk about what's going on in the game and why this is problematic, really problematic. People need to pay attention. All right, so the Detroit Pistons, I want to skip into the NBA for a little bit of time. Back when I was a young man, the Detroit Pistons were a really, really NBA franchise. They had Isaiah Thomas, they had the Beef Brothers, they had they had Lambeer, the big guy who was maybe the dirtiest player in NBA history, but they had a reputation as the Broad Street Bullies. They had a reputation as a great, great basketball team. I cannot, for the life of you, tell you what has happened to that organization in the NBA right now, because they are absolutely flatlining as a program, absolutely flatlining as an organization. Here's what I mean. Right now, the Pistons have lost 12 straight games in a row. Now, if you're a Celtic fan, you can go way back and try and remember the last time the Celtics lost 12 straight games in a row. I don't think you'd find it. I would look at most NBA teams that have had a 12-game losing streak. You won't see it. You won't see too much of it. The Detroit Pistons have had 3 12-game losing streaks in the past year. Their record in the last 300-plus games, 317 games, is 82-235, with a ton of favorable draft picks that they've been able to take and try and rebuild this organization. I don't know what's going on over there, but that organization has absolutely turtlebacked itself. They're flipped over on themselves. They can't get up, and they're just kind of flopping around. They are the NBA doormat. I looked at Houston this year, thought they'd have a really, really tough time. Ime Udoka, the coach over there, is doing a great job with them. They're not fabulous, but they're not the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons are coming out every single night and getting absolutely waylaid. In NBA, that's unusual. NBA games are usually a lot closer. And when we talk about defense being dead, that might be an area for the Pistons to try and explore things, because you don't have the offensive talent that these other teams have. You don't have LeBron James. You don't have Joel Embiid. You don't have Luka Doncic, the Joker, Giannis Antetokounmpo. You don't have those guys. So you need to coach them up, and you need to find some things that might work. And we've talked about a little bit about this. We try some zone, try some full court pressure, try anything that's going to try and slow this anvil down that keeps hitting you in the head. But like Wile E. Coyote, they just keep going right over the edge. I cannot, for the life of you, figure out what's going on with these guys. But let's talk about defense being dead. We alluded to this with the Celtics, when the Celtics put up 150 plus, and they absolutely destroyed their opponent by like 40 plus points. All right. Now we have the NBA version 2, which is, I guess there's a lot of people that might be looking at the over these days, because the Pacers put up 157 points. The Hawks put up 152. That's 309 points in an NBA basketball game. That's unbelievable, the amount of points scored. And both teams, it was 150 to 150. That's when you can tell things have really, really blossomed and gotten out of control. There is no defense being played. Defense is absolutely dead in the NBA. Absolutely dead. Tyrese Halliburton, we've mentioned him on this program. He had 9 made three-pointers in that game. 9 made. I'll guarantee you that at least 5 of them he was wide open. I'll guarantee you he was wide open. Another NBA little tidbit, Scoot Henderson, Number 3 pick in the NBA draft. We gave him a D, I think. Might be time to give it an F. He's having some ankle problems. He's having some issues, but he also just got remanded to their G League affiliate, and he'll work his way back up to the organization as he gets healthy. But right now, you know, it's one of those things where these young players are getting paid significant amounts of money, and there's the gamble. Those are the gambles. You know, caveat emptor, as they say, to the buyer beware. Right there, that looks like a bad buy. I want to take it local, get back into college for a second, and I want to take it local. UMass Lowell has gone from a Division II status all the way up to Division I. They're a member of America East right now. I have Coach Paquette, who was once, a lot of people had him on a hot seat as far as would he be able to retain the job, move the program forward? Because we've all seen now a lot of these schools. You have Stonehill, you have Lowell, you have a couple of other schools recently around here, Lemoyne, that have moved up from Division II to Division I. That's never an easy process. It's always difficult. Central Connecticut State did it many, many years back. It's a difficult, arduous process. And so what you're seeing now, though, I'm going to move Coach Paquette. They had him on the hot seat list. We move him over to the hot coaching list because they're 4-1 right now. They have done an absolute great job with that program. They're poised possibly to win the league, although Vermont and them will knock heads very, very closely. John Becker at Vermont. I don't know why some of the ADs that are looking for coaches don't look at this league. John Becker's produced nothing but a miracle in that league at Vermont. They've had that program at the top for a very long time. And now you look at Coach Paquette, Williams graduate, done a very, very good job with the program and did it the right way. They're 4-1 right now. They lost to Arizona State by 2. But beat Georgia Tech. So they must have taken at least $100,000 for the Georgia Tech game and probably got paid for the Arizona State game too. But to lose to Arizona State by 2 and to beat Georgia Tech, those are immense wins for Coach Paquette and his program. I wanted to mention them here because we're all in this UMass system and love it when the local teams do well. Frank Martin has his team looking pretty good. I saw them against Quinnipiac. But keep an eye on UMass Lowell. Keep an eye on UMass Lowell. They're better than people think. Okay. Bryant, just for 1 second, we're going to touch on the Bryant thing. Jared Grasso was gotten himself in trouble for a number of different things, a myriad of issues there. We're not going to get into any of them because we also don't know what's true and what isn't true. But obviously, things went sour. He resigned from his position just recently, allowed them to give the job to Phil Martelli Jr., which took out the Martelli interim factor because the dad is the interim head coach at the University of Michigan while Juwan Howard repairs from his health issues. And then the son was placed as the interim when things went south with Grasso. And so now Bryant went ahead, took the interim tag off him very, very quickly in a really, really pretty resounding and definitive move, gave him the job, and then they went out and beat the number 10 team in the country. So Bryant, keep an eye on them as well. New leadership, obviously going to be a little bit of a struggle for them to recalibrate under these difficult conditions. But they lifted the tag on Martelli and then went out and beat Florida Atlantic. So really good stuff happening there. What I like is that when this stuff goes on with the head coach, whether it be with Grasso at Bryant or at Fairfield with their coach and a number of different places that you look, it's really, really difficult on the players. It's really, really difficult on the team because a lot of times they had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on. And therefore, they're now just innocent victims and innocent bystanders in all of this. So when I see Martelli come in and take that team, recalibrate them, and then go say, okay, fellas, we got the number 10 team in the country. Let's put some good news in the newspaper about Bryant University. I love it. I love it because they were able to change the tone there, able to change the conversation there very, very quickly. Fairfield is not the same thing because it was the head coach, a couple of assistant coaches. They turned it over to one of the assistant coaches who was there, Chris Casey, who's an absolute gentleman and a wonderful coach. But that's a really, really tough league to have this happen in. And I just see them struggling right now, and they're having a tough time, and I reach out, I reach out to the because that makes me feel bad because the young men signed up for something a little bit better than that. The young men signed up for a better experience than that, and you only get 4 years, and you can't replace your senior year. As Deval Patrick said, you can't take third grade over, and so you don't get those years back. And when those years just go away, and they're caught up in turmoil and stuff that the adults bring into the world, I find that a little bit, to be off-putting to me. I like to see it played straight. And you look at some of these coaches with their egos and their contracts and all the other stuff. I swear to you, if anybody ever gave me $300,000 to $400,000 to coach basketball, you would never get a peep out of me, and you certainly wouldn't see me stepping out on somebody on the Marriott dance floor. Okay, so that's it for Feed 'em Fish right now. We're going to roll into some of the different stuff happening.
Okay, so I can find a lot of Frank Martin stuff.
Let's see what you got.
But not the UMass one.
Okay, so I'm going to describe it to people, all right?
I mean, there's plenty of stuff of him yelling at people he's over the years.
Yeah, there's one just recently. And what happened over the years happened over the years. Okay, I'd never been one for let's go back into the past and say, hey, 25 years ago you did this and now we got to go get you for it. Never been a big fan of that. But now we're in the present. All right, and let me just walk through a couple of these scenarios for you. I don't think I need to explain to people why they're deleterious to the game and why there needs to be, whether it's former Governor Baker or some of these conference commissioners who get paid a lot of money or the athletic directors at these schools, but there needs to be some type of intervention with some of these coaches. All right, the picture is as they go to the sidelines, I don't even know what the kid did. I have no idea what got Frank Martin as incensed as it was. But he is right up in this young man's face. I mean, he is an inch from this young man's nose, and he looks like he's blown a gasket. The kid looks like he's afraid, and it doesn't have a very good optic, if you know what I mean. Okay? And then take that optic and then put it into today's world. I think Bernadette McGlade from the A-10, Ryan Bamford, I'm going to put you both on speed dial right here and say, you should sit down with this gentleman and say that's unacceptable because it paints a bad picture of the Atlantic 10, paints a bad picture of the UMass program, and it is totally, and I'm going to say this, totally 110% unnecessary. If that's what you have to do to motivate people, you're not teaching well. There was a moment right there where you could have explained point blank as a teaching moment, this is what I think you did wrong. This is what I think you could do better. At no point does that involve you climbing up into this young man's face, being stared down by his head coach in front of thousands of people, and then saying, go sit on the bench. You're not good enough. That was awful. Absolutely awful. And I'm just going to offer 2 cents of advice. The optic of that was terrible. The optic of that was terrible. And maybe there's UMass people working overtime to see that you can't find it, Pete. But It's out there. It's out there. And I was just a little bit taken aback by it myself personally because I've been a coach. And I don't think there's any reason to jump up in somebody's face like that. I really, really don't. Especially with the power imbalance. I'm the head coach. I control the playing time. That's all I need. I don't need to be in his face. I don't need to be screaming at him. I just need to take him out of the game. That sends the message that I'm looking for. You're not playing up to the level that we want you to play up to. It's simple. But all of this stuff that's gone on, histrionics, and we talked about Coach Knight and some of the drag on his career that was created by that. I certainly am no perfect individual, but I can't remember ever being in one of my players' faces like that. And certainly, if I had been, I certainly would expect to be in my athletic director's office the next day. Certainly do think I would be getting a call from the commissioner of our league to sit there and say, that doesn't reflect well on us. Doesn't reflect well on us at all. Okay, scenario 2 was the exchange between Shaw Holloway and Donald Copeland after the game. Seton Hall playing Wagner. Wagner loses by 20. I don't know what occurred during this time. But the two of them come together to shake hands and wind up in a physical confrontation. Wind up in a situation where they're shaking hands and he kind of pushes Copeland away. Copeland says something to him. And then the two teams proceed to shake hands right after that. So Think about the bad blood that you just incorporated into this whole formula. Players of that age are often very reactionary. You could have caused a really, really bad scenario in that gym with your leadership failing. And so, again, anybody can go and look at it. It's all over the internet. The two of them come together. The game is over. Here it is right here. Pete's a magician. Holloway on the left, Copeland on the right. He stops him, grabs him, and don't kind of let him go now. And now they're having a word, and then he just pulls by him, and totally inappropriate to do that. And I was of the mindset that those guys were friends, that they knew each other. And so if that's the case, now look, he's going down the line and shaking hands with every single player. Now, what's to stop all of the players from involving themselves in that? Absolutely terrible. Seton Hall, have a sit down with your coach. Have a sit down with your players, because that can incite violence. That can incite something that goes really, really bad. Okay? And again, I can be fiery on the sidelines, and I'll get after it as much as anybody. But when the game's over and you've won the game by 20 points, there's absolutely no reason for that.
Yep.
Okay? You're a role model. Charles Barkley was wrong. You are a role model. Act like it. Okay? Because that's just crazy. All right. The last one I asked you to get, Pete, and this one was, I'm from New York, but I thought that this one was a little bit on the other side because, man, this could have created a really, really bad situation. It's Providence against Kansas State, and it's at the end of the game. Kansas State is winning the game, and they're being pressed by Providence. And so you can see it here. Move over to the right hand of the screen. Young man getting open, a little bump there. He comes back in and punches this guy right in the throat. Now he turns and goes back after him. Finally, you see an assistant coach get in there. But look at the referees. Look at how slowly they're moving towards this thing. Look at now. Pete, do me a favor and run it back. Because the coaches are allowed to leave the bench. Now, new rule. I thank them for that. I get to run into the right hand. Okay, here we go. Boom. Hits him in the throat, turns around, and now he nails him. Okay? Look at the benches. All of these guys in white shirts right here are supposed to be thrown out of the game. Anybody who stepped up, I give the group on the left-hand side here a lot of credit because their bench stayed pretty strong.
A little bit disciplined.
But every one of those guys that comes off the bench right there is supposed to be ejected from the game. I don't think they were. I have no idea where the referees were on this, but if you look at it up close, he punches him into the throat with his hand. The other guy hits the deck, regains his composure, comes back up, and goes into a full. Here it is, much closer. All right? First one, a little bump. Boom. He backs off. Now he comes back in and says, bang, right up into the chops he hits him, right into the throat. He recovers, comes back, and bang, right up into the throat here. Now, that's a coach that grabbed him. That's another coach that grabs the other guy. But now you see all the players and the coaches from the other side come down the line here, but it's too late. Those guys should have been thrown out of the game. Those guys should have been taken out, and then they have further suspensions to handle after that. But what I'm talking about here is some of the behavior of the coaches is now spilling over into what we're seeing with the players. And if this doesn't get reprimanded and this doesn't get stopped immediately, forthwith, you're going to have a melee on your hands that you had similar to when the Indiana Pacers jumped into.
He's going to go by you.
Okay? This one was a happy shot. This one was a buzzer beater I wanted to throw in there at the end. Boom. That's an unbelievably difficult way to lose a basketball game. A crazy, crazy ending. But that's what college basketball is supposed to be about. Guys running onto the floor, celebrating, having a great time. Fans are involved in it. It doesn't involve punching anybody. Doesn't involve coaching bad behavior. Doesn't involve getting up into the face of anybody. So I just wanted to jump off on Feed 'em Fish with that at the end and just say, let's do better. We are role models. We are examples for these young people. And anybody who says differently, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. All right. So we got a little bit of NBA stuff. We got a little bit of college basketball stuff to finish with today. A little fired up by that. little fired up by
I
that.
agree with you, though.
There's no place in the game for that.
You know,
Absolutely no place in the game for that.
a lot of these kids, 90% of these kids are not going on to the NBA. This is the end of their professional college career, and they have to go out into the world. And, they're looking up to you as a coach to set examples for them, just as much as they look up to their parents.
It's also, it's gone and become part of our fabric of our society as well. This isn't just isolated to athletics, to basketball, to anything. It's part and parcel of our society right now as well. And I think we've always been a little bit towards the violent side in our society. And I grew up in the Bronx, which might have been the most violent place in the world when I grew up there. But this is crazy. This is going to get people hurt. And most of these people, because back in the day when a fight broke out, all of us knew how to fight. We had been in fights before in grammar school. I used to say I was 15-0 before my first communion. It was more like 7-8.
Yep.
But of course you can change that as history goes. But I had been in a bunch of fights long before I went into the first fight I ever saw in a basketball game or in an Irish bar. And I knew how to handle myself and knew how to do this. None of these young men have ever been allowed to fight in their entire lives. That's part of the problem, is that it's all bottled up. And then when it spills over the top like a boiled pot. It's impossible to control. It's impossible to contain. And I thank the NCAA for their sage wisdom of allowing me at 63 years old to say, yeah, jump into the middle of that. There's a bunch of guys out there swinging hands, and we need you to go break it up. And as much as I certainly would, and at any time I don't want to see anybody get hurt, okay? That ain't my job. You can look at my job description. It's not in there. It's not in there. All right. NBA. Celtics still holding on, still looking pretty good. They're being closely watched by the Sixers, but I think that they're right now showing themselves in the Eastern Conference to be the best team in the Eastern Conference. The West is a little bit more upside down than I thought it would be. Oklahoma City, we talked about them, they're rising. The Nuggets are hanging tough, but for some reason, they're just not looking as good as they did last year. Obviously, there can be some post-championship hangover there as well, too. But right now, what you're looking at is, in addition to the Pistons, with their 12-game losses, you have some teams that are hot now, and they're starting to make moves. The Magic are hot. The Kings are hot. They got some of their players back from injury. And so I think right now the NBA is shaping up pretty well. I think they'd be advised to try and start playing a little tiny bit of defense, 309 points. If that was a score for my golf team, I'd be ecstatic. If my golf team could throw up a 309, I'd be ecstatic. But if that was in a basketball game, I'd start thinking about maybe we want to get back to the basics of blocking out, rebounding, guarding our man, and not letting the guy score every time he touches the basketball. I can remember playing the game. It was personal when you got scored on. Now it's no longer personal. The way that you handle that, instead of stopping the player from scoring, is you go do your own scoring. You go down the line and do your own scoring. Okay, so who's doing well right now individually in the NBA? We talk about this just about every week. There's not a lot of change, not a lot of change right now. But in the NBA stat leaders, just want to go through it a little bit because soon they'll start to have some conversation about MVP. And right now, I would say if you look at his recent stat line, although in Milwaukee been very, very quiet, they're hot right now. The Lillard trade really, really did well for them. It worked well. It very rarely does a trade like that work well for both teams, but this seems to have worked out well for both teams. The Celtics were in that trade. They got a little bit of something when they got Holiday. Lillard going in seems to have been pretty seamless, and he seems to be fitting in there very, very well. But if you look at Antetokounmpo last week, he had 50 points. He had some monster games last week, and he's really, really playing at an elite level right now. I would say he probably has, the edge over some of the other players. Joel Embiid is leading the league in scoring and also doing very, very well in some other categories. Again, he could be a repeat MVP, which would be exciting for the NBA. But you also have Kevin Durant has really, really stepped his game up recently, and he's now number 2 in scoring in the NBA. You have Luka is number 3, and Luka is also doing really, really well in the areas of assisting and rebounding. Same thing with Jokic. Jokic is on pace. He's at 8 point and change with his assist, but everything else is a double-double. If he gets 1.5 assists more, he's going to average a triple-double again. So I think he's doing real well. Steph Curry is in the 4th spot, and then you have Giannis just recently with the monster games that he's had. That he's moved up and done very well. Tyrese Halliburton remains the leader in assists. He also hit 9 straight threes last week in that game where the Pacers and the Magics put up all those points. 9 threes in a game is unbelievable. That's 27 points right there. He wound up having 30 plus, and his assisting is really where I'm excited about his game because you hadn't really seen that from him. He was really a shooter, knockdown guy. Played at Iowa State, so he didn't have a really high profile. But he's leading the league in assists right now. Trae Young from Atlanta is still up there in assists and doing well. And then you have Fred VanVleet, which is a bit of a surprise because he likes to shoot it pretty good. And then you have Jokic and LaMelo Ball, who I think is one of the better point guards in the league, doing very, very well. Jokic is also leading the league in rebounding. Sabonis is 2nd. Rudy Gobert, even after the chokehold from Draymond Green, happens to be in 3rd. Anthony Davis is in 4th, and Michael Robinson's in 5th. Anthony Davis also leading in blocks. But you're having a situation with Davis where his effort is just too sporadic for a number 2 guy. You're going to get what you get out of LeBron every single night. And if the Lakers, Coach Ham, Jeannie Buss, any of those LA people out there are listening, you got 4-hour delay in order to get this done, a 3-hour delay to get this done. Move LeBron James to the point guard position. You don't have a solid number 1 point guard there. Move him to the point guard and live with the consequences. When you have Anthony Davis as mercurial and as often injured as he is, you don't really have a solid number 2. So you need to find ways to increase your number 1, to put a little bit more glow on your number 1. And the way to do that with LeBron is to put the ball in his hands a lot more than they are. And you won't see him in some of these statistical categories, but he's in every statistical category. Right now, he's having, and he's close to 40, he might be 40, he's having maybe one of the best years he's ever had in his career. I really, really have been excited with the way he's playing basketball right now, but the Lakers just don't have enough around him. The Lakers just don't have enough around him. I think OKC is better than them. I think the Clippers might be better than them right now because they have the depth. But I don't know how the Clippers are adjusting to life with Harden. That hasn't been good. Hasn't been a really good formula for other teams. Hopefully they can sustain it. They have a lot of talent on that team. Westbrook and Harden, obviously, 2 pieces. They're both mercurial, though. They're both have had some issues in the past where people kind of. But Russell Westbrook has. They both have unbelievable numbers. To put them with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, if they stay healthy, I think that they could be one of the top teams in the Western Conference. But it's again going to be, Pete, you talk about this all the time. It's going to be chemistry. It's going to be chemistry. The Pelicans are holding on, and they're currently in playoff spot right now because Zion Williamson's been healthy. Zion Williamson's doing well, and when he's healthy, they're a completely different team because he is such a talent, such an unbelievable superstar talent. He needs to get into his training regimen a little bit better and take some of his weight off because it's impacting his lower extremities. That's why he's getting hurt all the time. But not like a drastic amount, but he needs to start training and doing things in a different way than what he's doing right now because 82 games is a very, very long season. And you can't really get through it when you're carrying that extra weight every single time, it's 20, 25 pounds extra coming down on your legs when you land, when you fall, everything. It just becomes deleterious.
I think someone needs to give him a gift membership to TB12 for Christmas.
He's a
Because I think that would work well for some. That sounds like that would be right in that wheelhouse.
and I think they need to change the training way that they do, because some of these young men have such problems with their feet. There have to be ways to make the lower extremities stronger than what they're doing right now. You see all of these guys like Antetokounmpo, these guys, they got muscles up on the top of their body. Their strength level is unbelievable. They can bench press 250, 300 pounds, no problem. But when it comes to the lower extremities, that's where everybody's weak. And that's when you have from Sean Bradley all the way down. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of the only players that really, really didn't have that with that size and that length. But you look at Sean Bradley, Holmgren, some of the other players that have been big, tall players like that, Bol, that just have a really, really difficult time with that. And we've talked about that with Wembanyama and Holmgren. And we'll see. My New York Knicks holding on, doing okay. They look good at times, and then other times they don't look good. Celtics kind of dismantled them a little bit, but that's just kind of showing them who the big dog in the Eastern Conference is. Most nights out there, not bad. The Nets are struggling a little bit. They're not doing too great. But most of the East Coast teams are being rated pretty well, while the West Coast teams are kind of struggling. The Warriors, the Lakers, some of those teams are not off to great starts. But right now, if I had to pick an MVP in the NBA and a Rookie of the Year in the NBA, I think MVP would go to Antetokounmpo without question. And I think if we picked the Rookie of the Year right now, today, I'd probably give it to Wembanyama, although I think the young man Miller from the Charlotte Hornets is doing really well and very, very close behind. So college basketball, we're going to slip into now a little bit and talk about some of the good players that are over there, but also we have Ken Pom ratings. We've talked about that. We want to talk about that a little bit today as well to kind of give you an idea of this is what the numerical standard is. This is what people who take a computer and put all of this stuff into a computer that I can't understand and then come out with a number. And this is very, very much you're going to see as the wave of the future. And what I mean by the wave of the future is what's coming down the road here is Power 5 will go to hyperspace. They will absorb all of the resources with them. And what that means is the automatic bids for lower conferences, such as the MAC, the Ivy League, the America East, those conference bids are going to go. And what they're going to do is choose the top 68 and make the NCAA tournament based upon a mathematical, algorithmic equation which says this is your best 68. Because as we get to everything, it's very subjective. And I understand the argument of the Power 5 schools. The argument is this: Rutgers will beat Manhattan College every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. Rutgers doesn't get invited to the NCAA tournament because they finish 11th in their league. But Manhattan College gets invited because they happen to have an automatic qualifier and a bid. Okay? Same thing with FDU. LIU, Brooklyn, any of those lower level schools, they have a chance to get the bid when they win their conference tournament. That's what makes basketball exciting.
Isn't that part of the charm?
It's what it is. That's what it always has been. They call it March Madness for a reason.
Right.
And so they've made millions and millions of dollars off of it for a reason. And so now you look at these people that are in there, pearl clutchers and bean counters and all of the people who look only at return on investment, who look only at a numbers-driven thing. What you're going to do is you're going to make this thing unrecognizable to the average fan. And so we've talked about that. Ken Pom probably has the best algorithmic approach, in my opinion. You have Jeff Sagarin. For years, I never get on the bus when we're going on a trip without Jeff Sagarin's report. I never get on the bus when we got a 2-hour trip without Ken Pom's report. And what it does is it allows you to look at some of the cannolis, right? Ken Pom don't like cannolis. Ken Palm doesn't want you playing 10 guaranteed games against lower opponents that are ranked in the 300s. And so when you see a team that's 6-0, but Ken Palm's got them, AP might have them top 5. They might have them in the top 10. Ken Palm might have them 24th because he knows how many cannolis they've devoured. He's put that into his computer. His computer has spit the cannoli out. And now you wind up with a number that says, oh, my God, why are they listed in this position? So let's go through a little bit of it. Right now, to me, and again, I'm a visual. I say this to people on the show all the time. I'm a visual person when it comes to basketball. I watch it, I look at it, and it'll either make complete sense to me or it will not. Visually, and without any Ken Palm, without any Sagarin, without any math that I failed 13 times in a row, without any of that, Houston, to me, the Cougars look like the best team in the country. And this is nothing short of program integrity, because everybody that Kelvin Sampson recruits to that program is going to get in a defensive stance. They're going to play as hard as they can possibly play, and they're going to represent that school with everything that they have. That's the way it should be done. And now the program integrity, although you watched them lose Jerace Walker, you lost them lose a powerhouse guard that was drafted 22nd, 23rd in the NBA draft, and now they're turned around. They're right back at the top of it. And you say, how is that possible? How is Danny Hurley doing that? And if you know Danny Hurley's dad, you understand exactly how they're doing it. They're doing it with program integrity. They're doing it with the right way to do things and living with that. Kelvin Sampson, although they'll lose Jerace Walker after a year, they'll lose another great player after a year. They are just being able to reload because they have a system. They have something in place that works. And what they're doing right now is they are by far the number one defensive team in the country. NBA, ABA, NEBA, NCAA, they're the best team in the country on defense. And Kelvin Sampson was never that way. I don't know what happened to him when he got that Indiana job, which I thought was a poor match for both Indiana and Kelvin Sampson. But I think the time that he might have spent in Indiana really, really worked him into a good defensive basketball coach, because right now they have the best defensive team in the country. I have them number one. Ken Palm has gone ahead and put Purdue number one. Purdue beat Gonzaga, had some really, really good wins under their belt. I'm not disputing this at all, but I did watch both teams play, and I think Houston's better. I think Purdue's very, very good, but I just question that they can get lit up by the wrong team. For example, if they were to play Auburn, I think that'd be a really bad match for them. If they were to play a team with a really, really good set of athletes and really, really an up-tempo style, I think that could be problematic for Purdue, because they're more of a half-court, let's run our stuff and let's do our thing. So I think right now I'd go with Houston, although Ken Palm has Purdue. I think you could flip both of those. I was really high on Kansas until I watched Marquette dismantle them the other night, and that was last night. And so Kansas I've dropped a little bit. Duke I've dropped a little bit. I don't think that Duke is that good. I think Kansas will recalibrate and just call it a tough night. I think they'll be fine. I think they're pretty good. I don't think the fans out in Lawrence, Kansas should be alarmed right now. That was a good Marquette team that beat you. But keep an eye on it, because they're just missing something in a few different places. Same thing as Duke. When you come out against these really good ball clubs, if you have a weakness, their coaching staff is working overtime to try and find that weakness and exploit that weakness. And I think both Duke and Kansas kind of got exploited over the past week for their weaknesses. Let's see now, because Bill Self is a great coach. And what a great coach does is it minimizes his team's weaknesses and he augments their team's strengths. And so Self is a master at that, an absolute master at that. I'm interested to see what happens at Duke, because John Shire just doesn't have that same experience, same skill set, same kind of turnaround that you've watched him do time and time again after a bad loss like that. Duke lost to Arizona. There's no harm in that. I'm talking visually. There's something not 100% right with that group, and I'm not sure what it is. But I think it's pretty much locked into the fact that they're not sure what type of team they want to be. They got two great inside players. Are you a low post operation? They got Tyrese Proctor and some other really good players out on the perimeter. Are they a perimeter organization? Are they a point guard driven organization with Roach and some of the other players that they have there? Right now, it doesn't appear to me that they have an identity, and that's a little bit dangerous. You can formulate one and grab one over the way, but right now it doesn't look like they have one, and that's a little bit frightening to watch because they have such great talent, such immense talent. I think North Carolina, I've said this before, and by the way, we're 5-0 with our picks, Pete. We haven't lost a pick yet. But I think North Carolina, if there's any people out there that look at those long-term things where we can bet on who might win the ACC regular season, North Carolina or Miami wins the regular season instead of Duke. I'm going to call it here. That's why I love being on the show, because you can go back and say what we thought and then go back and say, catch it, and then tell us later, no, you didn't say that. You were the opposite. So have fun with that. They have the UConn Huskies at number 3, and I think they're really good. I think they belong up there. And the metamorphosis from Danny Hurley as a coach has just been unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I was worried about him, to be honest with you. I was worried about his mental health. I thought that the job might have been too much for him. And then working with some different people, but he really, really cites his wife for having a significant impact on his sideline behavior and demeanor. And it's worked. It's worked because he showed his players that he's capable of change. And when he goes in and now he's asking his players to be capable of change, he can point to it that he's using his own behavior, his own action as a hallmark. And so this is what he's doing with that program. I watched him as a young man playing. I watched him play in high school. I watched him play in college and saw some of the difficulties that he had when he was a college player. So I couldn't be happier for him, because your mental health is everything. If you're not happy, they can pay you millions of dollars, but if you're not happy, then that's really, really makes the day long and hard to get through. And so any of these coaches that can find a little bit more happiness on that sidelines, I applaud that. They have Kansas at number 4, but I ran this report before they got bounced by Marquette last night. What happens to Kansas now after the loss to Marquette? Because you have Marquette in the top 25 too. So that's not a bump loss really where you're going to say, oh my God, they're going to get bumped down. But they certainly probably don't belong in the top 10 anymore. Duke, after the loss to Arizona, again, really, really good team, Arizona. The game was at Duke. You expect Duke to win that game, especially with their ranking and Arizona not being ranked well. But they didn't handle the game well, and so they got to get bounced out of the top 10, I think, as well too. St. John's fans, little bumpy so far. You know, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit in the past, but they were in the bounce of top 25 there, but they're clearly not now. And I watched them play the other night. They have some issues. You're going to have to give Pitino some time to get it together. But St. John's is not the same program that it once was. They are just like Syracuse, just like some of these other programs that have now gone into power conferences, went to conferences that aided and abetted their football program more than it helped their basketball program. And now they're in this lifelock situation where they're going to have a real, real tough time getting up. St. John's is going to have a tough time getting up. And you would think that with Pitino, with the NIL arrangements that'll come in as a result of that, you'd think they'd be able to get up faster than they have been, but their recruiting hasn't really knocked anybody out of the park. They haven't gotten one of the VJ Edgecombe sits in their backyard, and maybe they can get Edgecombe, but probably going to go to Duke. And they had Boogie Flan sitting in their backyard, and Rick Pitino with an NBA profile as an NBA coach and sent lots of guys on to play in the NBA. Boogie Flan still wound up going to Kentucky. So until they pull off, that one big hit where they get that superstar player to come to their program and then start to build around that, I'm going to reserve judgment, because right now the NIL hurts Pitino. Because if you're one of the best coaches in the country, then people would want to come to you because they want to play for you. But now when somebody can say, yeah, he's a really good coach, but we have $2 million for you, and they only have $500,000, everybody's taking the $2 million, and then they're going to take it twice on Sunday. So I see what they're trying to do at St. John's, but I would be excited if I was St. John's fans. I would also think that the path of 10,000 miles begins with one footstep. You need to take a step. You need to get somebody to come to that program that's an absolute knockout superstar. Right now, Duke is absorbing everybody. North Carolina, the big programs are absorbing everybody. And if Pitino wants to be worth his salt, they got to get into it right now, and they got to land somebody that's not a portal guy. They got to land somebody that says, I want to go to St. John's with Coach Pitino and build this program back up to the heights that it once was. Is that possible? Only time will tell. Arizona moved up. Alabama's very good. Alabama's very good. I watched them play. Alabama and Auburn are both very good. So, Pete, what do we got left?
About a minute.
A minute. All right. I'll give them the rest of the top 10 here. Tennessee, although Tennessee lost last night. Creighton, Gonzaga, and Baylor. Gonzaga lost again. So we're going to see some shifting, going to see some movement in that. But I wanted to just take a brief second here to talk about how thankful I am for my life, for my family, for everybody in my life. But also I want to thank you, Pete, for helping us put In the Zone together, because this has been something in my life that I am very thankful for. And when you are thankful, part of that process is humility. Part of that process is allocating your personal resources to the right place. And where you allocate those resources, when you do it to family and you do it to your craft and you do it within those frame of things, you never go wrong. You can always go right. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody from In the Zone. This holiday season is going to be awesome. I hope you all have a great one, and we'll see you next week.